You know that feeling when you're scrolling through social media and you see someone your age posting photos of their brand new car, and suddenly you feel like you're falling behind in life. The perfectly staged picture with the sunset reflecting off the hood, that new car smell you can almost smell through the screen, and the caption about treating yourself because you deserve it. And here's the thing that really gets me. That person is probably drowning in monthly payments that would make your stomach turn. So, what's going on here? How did we reach a point where Americans owe $1.6 trillion in auto loans, which is enough to buy every single residential home in New York City and still have money left over? My name is Joe, and I spend way too much time thinking about money and why people make the financial decisions they do. If you've ever wondered how your coworker can afford that luxury SUV while constantly complaining about being broke, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it helps explain this modern mystery. Now, before we dive into the mechanics of how this system works, let me paint you a picture of what we're actually dealing with here. Americans have always had a strange relationship with vehicles. They're not just transportation to us. They're status symbols, freedom machines, and for most people, a visible measure of success. We've been trained from a young age that a cool car means someone is doing well. If you see your neighbor pull up in a brand new vehicle, you assume they must be doing something right. But here's where things have gotten completely twisted. The vehicles that used to provide us freedom and the ability to travel and explore everything America has to offer are now turning into prisons of monthly payments that sometimes ruin people's lives off of a dumb decision they made just to look cool in front of some friends. But how did we get here? How could something so amazing turn into a trap for so many? And more importantly, how did the car dealership industry essentially turn into a loan dealership industry? To understand this, you have to look at what actually happens when you show up at a dealership to purchase a brand new car. There are four main characters in this little drama. Number one, you, the buyer. Number two, the dealer, the guy sitting across from you at the desk trying to sell you on that new SUV you just have to have. Number three, you have the manufacturer of the car. And finally, number four, the financing company. And here's what most people don't realize. The dealer doesn't actually care that much about selling you the car. They care about selling you the loan. The truth is, there's a whole system designed to make these impossible payments seem possible, and understanding how this system works isn't just about satisfying curiosity. It's about protecting yourself from making a decision that could set your financial progress back by years. The average new car payment in America has crossed into territory that would have been considered absolutely insane just a decade ago. We're talking about monthly payments that exceed what many people pay for rent. And yet somehow, millions of Americans are signing on the dotted line every single month, driving off the lot in vehicles that cost more than the median household income. But here's where it gets really interesting. Most of these people aren't secretly millionaires hiding their wealth. They're not crypto billionaires or trust fund babies. They're teachers, nurses, mechanics, retail workers, and office employees. Regular folks with regular jobs who somehow found a way to make the numbers work, or at least they think they did. The system has gotten incredibly sophisticated at making impossible payments feel manageable. 8 4-month loans, 96-month loans, balloon payments, lease options that look like purchases but are really just long-term rentals. They've figured out every possible way to stretch a payment out until it looks small enough that you can ignore how much you're actually paying in total. Let me break down exactly how this works in practice because it's absolutely fascinating. You walk into the dealership looking at a $40,000 vehicle. That seems like a lot of money, right? But then the finance manager starts working their magic. They tell you they can get you a payment of just $450 per month. That doesn't sound too bad, does it? I mean, that's less than what many people spend on rent or even their phone bill and internet combined. What they don't emphasize is that this $450 payment is stretched out over 8 years. That's 96 months. And here's the part that will blow your mind. By the time you finish paying for that car, you'll have paid over $50,000 in total, including interest. For a vehicle that will be worth maybe $8,000 by the time you own it outright, you're essentially paying $42,000 in interest and depreciation just to drive a newer car for 8 years. The psychological trap here is absolutely fascinating. When you're sitting in that dealership looking at that shiny new car, your brain is doing something called present bias. You're hyper focused on how amazing it would feel to drive that car home today. You're imagining the freedom, the status, the feeling of success. What you're not doing is calculating what 8 years of car payments will actually cost you in lost opportunities. You're not thinking about the fact that $3,200 per year in car payments could be invested and potentially grow into something substantial over time. You're not considering that this single decision might prevent you from saving your first $10,000, which, as we've discussed, completely changes your relationship with money and opens up opportunities that simply don't exist when you're living paycheck to paycheck. Here's something that might blow your mind. The person driving that brand new truck that costs more than most people's houses probably makes less money than you do. They're just willing to sacrifice their financial future for the feeling of driving something new today. And the really crazy part is that society has normalized this behavior. We've built a society that pretty much requires a car to live in. Most cities don't have adequate public transportation. Many jobs require you to have your own vehicle, so you need a car. But cars are now more expensive than ever, and the financing options have become easier to get, which is starting to flip everything on its head. The cars that used to provide us freedom and a journey through life are now turning into monthly payment prisons that keep people trapped in the same financial patterns for decades. The transformation that happens when you sign that car loan paperwork isn't just about the money itself. It's about becoming the type of person who prioritizes immediate gratification over long-term security. And that identity shift creates ripple effects that extend into every corner of your financial life in ways you probably never expected. When you commit to a massive car payment, you're not just agreeing to pay money every month. You're agreeing to keep yourself in a position where you can't afford to take risks. You can't afford to invest in yourself through education or certifications. You can't afford to start a business. You can't afford to move to a better location for a job opportunity. You're locking yourself into your current situation, often for nearly a decade. Let me give you a concrete example. Say you're looking at a car with a $600 monthly payment. That's $7,200 per year. Over 5 years, that's $36,000. Over 8 years, which is becoming increasingly common, that's $57,600. And here's the part that will really keep you up at night. That's not including interest. With typical car loan rates, you're probably paying another $10,000 to $15,000 in interest on top of that. So you're spending nearly $70,000 over 8 years for a vehicle that will be worth almost nothing by the time you finish paying for it. And during those 8 years, you're unable to save money. You're unable to build any kind of financial foundation. You're effectively treading water for almost a decade, all for the privilege of driving a newer car. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Let's say instead of that $600 car payment, you bought a reliable used car for $15,000 with a $300 payment over 5 years. That's $18,000 total. You're saving $52,000 compared to the new car option. Now, what if you took that extra $300 per month and invested it instead? Even with a conservative 7% return, that $300 per month would grow to over $34,000 in 8 years. So the choice isn't really between a new car and an old car. The choice is between a new car and having $34,000 in investments, plus a reliable vehicle. Most people never see this choice because they're only looking at the monthly payment, not the long-term impact. But here's what most people don't realize about the car payment trap. The majority of the damage doesn't come from the payment itself. It comes from the opportunity cost. Every dollar you're sending to the bank for that car payment is a dollar that can't be working for you in other ways. That's money that can't be building your emergency fund. That's money that can't be invested in the stock market. That's money that can't be used to start a side business. That's money that can't be used to pay down high interest debt. The opportunity cost of a massive car payment is absolutely staggering. And it's something that almost nobody talks about when they're trying to sell you on that new vehicle. Let me give you another example. Imagine you have a $500 car payment. Over 5 years, that's $30,000. What could you do with $30,000? Well, you could fully fund a Roth IRA for 3 years. You could start a small business. You could put a down payment on a rental property. You could pay off all your high interest credit card debt. You could invest in certifications that could boost your income by thousands per year. You could create an emergency fund that would give you the confidence to take risks in your career. The point is that $30,000 represents options. And options are what financial freedom is really about. When you lock yourself into a massive car payment, you're trading away options for the feeling of driving a newer car today. There's also something fascinating that happens to your brain chemistry when you're locked into a long-term car payment. Neuroscientists have found that financial commitment stress actually increases cortisol levels, which is your body's primary stress hormone. This means that signing up for an 8-year car loan doesn't just impact your finances, it literally changes how your body responds to daily challenges. Think about the last time you had a minor financial emergency. If you're already stretched thin with a massive car payment, that unexpected expense might as well be a crisis. You're immediately stressed about how you're going to cover it, whether you'll need to put it on a credit card or if you'll have to borrow money from family. But when you don't have that car payment hanging over your head, the same unexpected expense becomes manageable. You're annoyed, sure, but you're not panicked. This shift from panic to mild annoyance might seem small, but it has ripple effects throughout your entire life. When you're not constantly worried about money, you make better decisions in general. You sleep better, you're more productive at work, you're more patient with your family and friends. Financial stress affects every aspect of human behavior. And removing that stress unlocks mental energy that you can redirect toward actually improving your situation. The person with a manageable car payment has the mental bandwidth to notice opportunities. The person drowning in a massive car payment is too busy trying to survive to see anything else. The social dynamics of car payments are equally fascinating. We've created this weird culture where the car you drive is somehow a reflection of your worth as a person. People feel pressure to drive vehicles they can't really afford because they don't want to look like they're struggling. They don't want their friends to think they're not doing well, so they sign up for payments that keep them trapped just to maintain appearances. And the really crazy part is that most people don't even notice this happening. They just think everyone else is doing it, so it must be normal. And in a way, they're right. It has become normal, but just because something is normal doesn't mean it's smart. Let's talk about something called decision fatigue, which sounds like corporate buzzword nonsense, but is actually a real psychological phenomenon. Every day you make thousands of tiny financial decisions. Should I buy the generic pasta or the name brand? Can I afford to grab lunch today? Or should I pack a sandwich? Is it worth paying for premium gas or will regular be fine? Each of these micro decisions burns mental energy, and by the end of the day, you're exhausted from constantly calculating whether you can afford things. But here's what happens when you have a massive car payment hanging over your head. Suddenly, every single one of these daily financial decisions becomes more stressful because you have less margin for error. You're not choosing between generic and name brand pasta based on preference, you're choosing based on fear. This might seem like a small thing, but imagine how much mental energy you'd free up if you weren't constantly worried about money. I know someone who told me that after they finally paid off their car, the biggest change wasn't having an extra $400 per month. The biggest change was the mental freedom. They stopped waking up at 3 in the morning worrying about their bills. They stopped feeling anxious every time they opened their mailbox. They stopped avoiding social situations because they couldn't afford to participate. The psychological weight of that car payment was crushing them in ways they didn't even realize until it was gone. And this is something that almost nobody talks about when they're trying to sell you on that new vehicle. They talk about the features, the warranty, the technology. They don't talk about the anxiety, the stress, the feeling of being trapped. Here's something that most people don't realize about the car payment trap. The majority of the benefit doesn't come from driving a new car. The benefit comes from the feeling of success. The status, the social validation that comes with driving something nice. But here's the thing, you can get that same feeling in other ways that don't involve signing away your financial future for 8 years. You can feel successful by building savings. You can get social validation by becoming known as someone who's financially responsible. You can experience freedom by having options. These are deeper, more sustainable sources of satisfaction than the temporary thrill of driving a new car off the lot. Here's a reality check that might motivate you to think differently about car payments. The average American spends over $3,000 per year on car payments. That's not even counting insurance, gas, maintenance, and all the other costs of owning a vehicle. If you could redirect just half of that spending towards savings or investing, you'd have your first $10,000 in less than 7 years. And as we've discussed, hitting that $10,000 milestone completely changes your relationship with money and opens up opportunities that simply don't exist when you're living paycheck to paycheck. I'm not suggesting you should never have a nice car or that you should drive a piece of junk forever. I am pointing out that most people have more flexibility in their budgets than they realize, and that the decision to lock yourself into a massive car payment is often one that limits your options for years to come. The difference between someone who builds wealth and someone who stays trapped usually comes down to awareness and intentionality, not income level. I know people who make 6-figure salaries but are constantly broke because they're driving vehicles they can't afford. Meanwhile, I know people making $40,000 a year who have managed to accumulate substantial savings by being intentional about their spending, including their transportation choices. The difference isn't income, it's mindset. And avoiding the car payment trap is like a master class in developing the right financial mindset. You learn to distinguish between wants and needs. You become skilled at finding ways to reduce expenses without feeling deprived. Most importantly, you develop the patience to delay gratification, which is probably the single most valuable financial skill anyone can learn. Let me give you a practical example of what this looks like in real life. I have a friend named Sarah who makes about $55,000 per year. A few years ago, she was about to sign up for a $700 car payment on a brand new SUV. She had convinced herself that she deserved it after working hard for years. But then she did something that most people never do. She actually calculated what that payment would mean for her long term. She realized that $700 per month would prevent her from saving anything. It would keep her trapped in the same financial situation indefinitely. So she made a different choice. She bought a 3-year-old used car for $18,000 with a $350 payment. She took the extra $350 per month and started investing it. Fast forward 5 years, and that used car is still running fine. But more importantly, she has over $25,000 in investments that wouldn't exist if she had gone with the new car. She's built an emergency fund, she's started a side business, she's in a completely different financial position than she would have been. All because she made one different decision about a car payment. Here's another example. I know a guy named Mike who is paying $800 per month for a luxury vehicle. He was making good money, about $80,000 per year, but he was always broke. He couldn't save anything. He was constantly stressed about money. He felt like he was on a treadmill, working hard but never getting ahead. Eventually, he got tired of it. He sold the car, bought a reliable used vehicle for cash, and redirected that $800 per month toward his financial goals. Within 2 years, he had built an emergency fund, paid off all his credit card debt, and started investing. He told me that the hardest part wasn't the money. The hardest part was the ego hit of driving a less impressive car. But once he got over that initial embarrassment, he realized something important. Nobody actually cares what you drive as much as you think they do. And the people who do judge you based on your car aren't the people whose opinions should matter to you anyway. There's also something to be said for the confidence boost that comes with not having a massive car payment. When you know you're not trapped in a long-term loan, you walk into job interviews differently. You're more likely to negotiate salary and benefits because you're not desperate. This confidence often results in better job offers and higher compensation, creating a positive feedback loop that accelerates your financial progress. The person with the massive car payment is often forced to stay in jobs they hate because they can't afford a gap in income. The person without that burden has the freedom to take risks, to pursue better opportunities, to walk away from toxic situations. That freedom is worth infinitely more than the temporary thrill of driving a new car. Let's talk about something nobody mentions in personal finance articles, but everyone experiences in real life: the social pressure to keep up with appearances. When you're constantly stressed about your financial situation, it affects how you interact with other people in subtle but significant ways. You might avoid social situations because you can't afford to participate. You might feel embarrassed about your financial struggles and become withdrawn. You might even develop resentment toward friends who seem more financially stable. But when you make the decision to avoid the car payment trap, something interesting happens. You become more confident. You're more present in your relationships. You're less worried about what other people think because you know you're making smart decisions for your future. And ironically, this confidence often attracts more success and opportunities than the fancy car ever would. Here's something that might blow your mind. The person driving the brand new car with the $800 payment is often the one who's most stressed about money. They're the ones who can't afford to go out to dinner with friends. They're the ones who are terrified of losing their job. They're the ones who are one minor emergency away from financial disaster. Meanwhile, the person driving the 5-year-old paid off car might have $20,000 in savings, investments growing every month, and the peace of mind that comes from knowing they can handle whatever life throws at them. Who's actually winning here? The person who looks successful on the outside, but is stressed on the inside? Or the person who doesn't look as impressive, but is actually building wealth and has genuine peace of mind? The transformation that happens when you avoid the car payment trap isn't just about the money itself. It's about becoming the type of person who thinks long term instead of short term. It's about becoming someone who values freedom over appearance. It's about becoming someone who makes decisions based on what's actually best for your future, not what will impress your friends today. And that identity shift creates ripple effects that extend into every corner of your life in ways you probably never expected. When you become the type of person who avoids unnecessary debt, you start making better decisions in other areas too. You become more intentional about your spending. You become more focused on building wealth. You become more confident in your ability to create the life you want. So, there you have it. The car payment trap isn't just about the money itself, it's a complete psychological transformation that touches every aspect of your life. From limiting your career opportunities to increasing your stress levels to keeping you trapped in the same financial patterns for decades, this decision creates a domino effect that most people never see coming. If you're currently considering signing up for a massive car payment, or if you're already trapped in one, take a step back and really think about what you're giving up. The freedom you feel driving that new car off the lot today might come at the cost of your financial freedom for years to come. And that's a trade that's almost never worth making. The beautiful thing about this realization is that once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you understand how the car payment trap works, you start seeing it everywhere. You start understanding why your friend with the fancy car is always stressed about money. You start realizing that the people who seem to be doing well might actually be drowning in debt. And most importantly, you start making different decisions. You start choosing freedom over appearance. You start choosing long term wealth over short term status. You start becoming the type of person who actually builds wealth instead of just looking like they have wealth. And that transformation is worth infinitely more than any new car could ever be.